Everyone, I present to you the keynote speaker for today, Dr. Richard Deming.
So I'm 67 years old, so you just saw a senior on the move. I embody seniors on the move. I mean, who wants to be a senior that doesn't move? Let's keep moving. Movement is the closest thing we have to the fountain of youth. There's no hill that is anywhere near as important as keeping us young, as healthy, as movement. So, what an honor it is to be here today. This is my first time in front of a live audience.
All right.
Since March. So March, like 3 days before we got locked down, I had the honor of participating in the Storytellers series at Hoyt Sherman. And that was a lot of fun, and I had forgotten how much fun and energy and enjoyment I get out of being in front of real people. So, and I see friends out there. Hello, everyone, and former patients. And so this is a fun talk. This talk is not about me. This is a talk about lessons I've learned from taking care of patients and their families. So as you heard from Paris, I grew up in South Dakota. I went to South Dakota State. Any jackrabbits out here? Any other jackrabbits? I'm not going to ask about coyotes. I don't want to know about it. Okay, then I went to Creighton University for medical school. Any blue jays? Not a single blue jay or jackrabbit. Okay, that's okay. I was on a Navy scholarship in medical school, which gave me the opportunity to really join the Navy and see the world. I did my internship in San Diego, and then since I was in the Navy, I thought, wow, it'd be cool to do something I otherwise wouldn't have done had I just stayed in South Dakota. So I went into the military medical specialty of undersea medicine. And I went to Connecticut, and I learned all about submarines and taking care of sailors on submarines. And then I went to Panama City, Florida, where the Navy's experimental diving unit is, and I became a certified Navy scuba diver. Then I got sent to Hawaii, where I lived for 2 years in peacetime in Hawaii, taking care of parachute jumping, scuba diving, bomb disposal frogmen in Hawaii, in peacetime. Then I came into the specialty of radiation oncology. I did my residency at the University of California, San Francisco, and then I went to Bethesda, the National Cancer Institute, at the Naval Hospital, where I spent 2 years. And then 31 years ago this month, I moved to Des Moines, and I've been at MercyOne ever since then. And in the process, I learned a lot in South Dakota State, at Creighton, in my residency at the National Cancer Institute. Learned a lot, but I can tell you I've learned a whole lot more about people here taking care of cancer patients and their families. Treating cancer patients is not about killing cancer cells. It's about taking care of individuals who have cancer and their families. I'm not a tumor treater, as someone who cares for patients and their families. And this talk is really a glimpse into some of the lessons I've learned in 31 years of having the honor of taking care of patients and their families here in Des Moines. But it's kind of told around the story of Above and Beyond Cancer. So most people who know about Above and Beyond Cancer know about it because of the gonzo international trips that we take. So you'll see some stories of individuals on those trips, but it's really not about the trips. That's just a small portion of what Above and Beyond Cancer does. Above and Beyond Cancer is a not-for-profit that is dedicated to elevating the lives of those touched by cancer to create a healthier world. And those touched by cancer include those who've been diagnosed by cancer, those who are family members, and those who might have cancer in the future, which guess what? 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. And I would bet that every single person in this room has been touched by cancer. So a lot of what Above and Beyond Cancer is not just the cancer, but how do you live a full, active, enriched life even when you have bumps along the road? And that's some of what we're going to learn about today. So this is a picture of me from 2000, and it's kind of the prologue to how did Above and Beyond Cancer get started. And in the year 2000, I took my very first trip to the Himalayas. So I had been doing, just as a joyful thing to do, mountain climbing. And I had been climbing mountains in America, and in Canada, and South America, and Europe. But if you're a mountain climber, where do you want to go? You want to go where the world's highest mountains are, and that is in the Himalayas. So in the year 2000, I went online and signed up for an international major mountain climbing expedition. What do you think are the main requirements, the essential requirement to signing up for a major mountain climbing expedition? Your credit card. You have to have good credit. Your credit card has to clear, and really that's the only requirement. So all I knew is I was flying halfway around the world to join 5 other folks. Whoop, I might need some IT help here. I was going to join a team of 5 other folks from around the world, and all I really knew about them is that they had good credit. So I got on my plane. But that, being a good Boy Scout, I was really well prepared. I had been planning the trip for 6 months. So I had a new backpack, I had a new coat, I had a new hat, new gloves, I had a new sleeping bag, good to 50 below. I better take my old hat, my old gloves, I better have an extra coat, stuff. I had so much stuff. So I flew all the way to Kathmandu, met up with the team at a hotel in Kathmandu. The next day we flew on a little bitty plane up into eastern Nepal, camped that first night, got to use my brand new sleeping bag, good to 50 below. It was 90 degrees and 90% humidity, and we were at 4,000 feet. We had 10 days of hiking before we got to the mountain. And as we hiked through the villages, getting up to the mountain, I'm carrying this backpack with stuff and more stuff. I'm going through villages where they don't have anything. It didn't take too many days of carrying that heavy backpack before I realized that this stuff I'm carrying is not only, for the most part, unnecessary, but literally a burden. Yep. And I started getting rid of stuff. And the trip, I thought I was going on this trip to go further, farther, faster, higher, and earn bragging rights in cocktail conversation. But it ended up being a very small group of people together with a common, simple purpose. And as we journeyed through the villages and then ultimately up into the mountains with the simple Buddhist Sherpa, I realized that I had taken with me from Iowa a lot of stuff in my head that was not only unnecessary, but literally a burden. And as I simplified my life materialistically and philosophically, what I thought was a trip about climbing a mountain turned into a transformational journey that has changed my life. And I knew that it would be wonderful if someday I could share that sort of an experience with others. Let me just... So, there's going to be pictures, but I'll just keep talking. But thank you all for helping with that. But it wouldn't have happened in 2011, that was the first trip that we took cancer survivors to Nepal. If it weren't for, there we go, you're so good. Thank you for all your help. So yes, so it was further, farther, faster, higher, but it actually turned out to be, a transformational journey. And I have to tell you that the trip in 2011, when I took cancer survivors on a mountain climbing trip, would not have happened without this guy. Does anybody know who this guy is? Yep, this is Charlie Whitman, the first Iowan to ever summit Mount Everest. And it so happens that Charlie and our lives crossed because his wife was diagnosed with cancer. And as many of you in this room know, if you or a loved one is diagnosed with cancer, it's like a 2x4 up the side of your head. It wakes you up, it shocks you. Nothing is the same. So what do you do if you're diagnosed with cancer or if a loved one is diagnosed with cancer? You learn as much as you can about the diagnosis. You assemble the best possible team of doctors and caregivers and family and friend, and you proceed on that cancer journey with hope and optimism. Now, Kate's cancer diagnosis turned out to be very, very favorable, and she is doing fine. But in the process of going through their cancer journey, both of them realized that if you've got dreams in life, today is a good day to start those dreams. A cancer diagnosis reminds you of two things you already know, but desperately try to forget every day. Number one, you're gonna die someday. And number two, you don't know when that's gonna happen. So a cancer diagnosis reminds you of both of those things, and in the best of situations, allows you to reorder your priorities and focus on what's important. And out of that, Kate left her day job and became a writer of children's books. And Charlie, who's an attorney, decided it was time to actualize a dream that he had concocted when he was 13. So the dream was the World Triathlon, a totally made up event. So he was going to go to the north of England, wade into the Thames River where the Thames River begins, wade until it was deep enough to swim, and then swim south in the Thames River until it flows into the English Channel, hang a left in the English Channel, keep swimming until he ran into France, get out of the water in France and jump on a bicycle, ride his bicycle across Europe, up and over the Karakoram into Asia, ditch his bicycle in Kathmandu, and run to Everest Base Camp, and then summit Mount Everest. The World Triathlon. Now, he wanted to do it not just to prove he's the studliest guy around, but to take others with him, both physically and metaphorically, to prove that you can have totally outrageous dreams and actually make them come true. So I remember it was in January of 2010. This was going to be a 9-month journey for him. He was going to start on July 1st of 2010. And in January, we got together at the old Bistro Montage, which was in the Hotel Fort Des Moines. And I remember clearly we were sitting kind of in the lounge, over a beer or three. We concocted this plan. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if I took a group of my patients on a journey up to Everest Base Camp, and to be there right as he got there and was getting ready to summit. And we both agreed it would be a really cool thing to do. And then I didn't do anything about it. And then he took off on the journey, and then he got hit by a pickup truck riding his bike across Kazakhstan. And then one of my doctor partners died suddenly of a thoracic aneurysm. And then Charlie got altitude sickness going over the Karakoram, and he came back. And I just remember thinking, oh boy, I am glad I did not invest a lot of time and effort into this, because it's just not going to happen. But he recuperated, and over a dinner and bottle of wine or two, we concocted, this is too good to let it die. He's feeling good, he's going to go back and do it? I should really get this group together. And I said, yeah, let's do it. This would be great. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. And then I did nothing about it. And it was December, and it was a ballroom out at Prairie Meadows, and it was like the Greater Des Moines Business Hall of Fame dinner. And Lynn Hicks, who was the business editor of the Des Moines Register, I'll never forget, he came up to me that night with his little reporter notepad, and he said, Dr. Deming, I've heard rumors that you're taking a group of your survivors to Mount Everest Base Camp to be there when Charlie met Whitman summits. Is that true? And I said, yes. And he put it in the newspaper the next day. So one of the enduring life lessons that I will never forget is that if you got 1 foot in and 1 foot out, you're never going to get anything done. It's not until both feet are firmly planted in that you get anything done. And now I had like a month to assemble a team to take to Mount Everest, to go to base camp because I told the Des Moines Register I was going to do it. So, how do you get together a group of cancer survivors to go to Everest Base Camp? Well, the first thing I knew is that it would be a bigger, deeper, richer experience for everyone involved if it weren't limited just to people who could afford to go. So I just said, I'm going to pay for it. I'm just going to pay for everything. I'm going to pay for the plane trips. I'm going to pay for everything. I'm just going to beg people to go. Please come. Second life lesson. If you're passionate about something and you share your passion with others, they will come along. And what started off as me funding the entire trip turned out to be a number of other cancer organizations, hospitals, and individuals who said, hey, this is too cool to pass up. We want to be part of it. So let me introduce you to that group that came with us on the very, very first journey up to Everest Base Camp in 2011. And we date our organization to begin with this trip. So this is Justin. Justin was 26 years old, living up in Mason City, was the lead singer in a Mason City rock and roll band, also a waiter at Buffalo Wild Wings. He was having headaches for several weeks. Finally went into the emergency room. They did a scan. He had a tumor the size of a racquetball in his right temporal lobe. It was brain cancer. He had surgery, 6 weeks of radiation, 6 months of chemotherapy, and it was just a couple months out from his finishing chemo when he came on the trip with us. Because he's a lead singer in a rock and roll band, we took with us 2 guitars, a tambourine, and a cowbell. And we had a rockin' us band in the Kumbu. This is Teresa. She was 42 years old when she was diagnosed with breast cancer in both breasts simultaneously. She had both breasts removed, a whole bunch of chemotherapy and reconstruction. And not only had she gone through that, but 10 years previously, she'd had a total hip replacement for a congenital abnormality of her hips, and 8 years before, she'd had her entire colon removed for ulcerative colitis. Not a mountain climber, not an athlete. She wanted to be on this journey to be part of something bigger than she was. This is Bobby. Bobby's the only person I've ever diagnosed with cancer in the YMCA locker room. 5 a.m. one morning, he comes up to me and says, hey, Doc, take a feel of this. Had a big mass in his neck. It turned out to be a lymph node, stage 4 tonsil cancer. Darn near killed him with chemotherapy and radiation therapy. And he was 2 years out from all of that treatment when he signed up to be part of this journey. Amelia was 24 years old when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She had surgery, chemotherapy, radiation therapy. Lynette was 38 years old, nursing her newborn son, Parker, when her breast swelled up. Thought it was an infection, turned out to be an advanced breast cancer. She had surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation therapy, and she was cancer-free. 3.5 years later, it recurred. More chemo, more radiation, more surgery, and she was cancer-free. Came back 3 years later, more treatment. She was just 1 month out from having completed radiation. She decided to go on the trip. She brought along her husband, Chad. Now, Chad's about 230, 6'2", athletic guy, big, strong guy. Lynette's maybe 97 pounds soaking wet on a good day. Lynette's never been an athlete, doesn't have any excess body fat. When you're up in the mountains for 3 weeks, it really helps to have some extra body muscle, extra body fat, stamina. First person to get sick on the trip, Chad. Horrible. Lynette took care of him the entire time we were on the mountain trip. I remember getting this beautiful letter from him, from her. She said, you know, for the last 8 years, Chad had been taking care of me. This was my first opportunity to take care of Chad. Karen had breast cancer. She was about 5 years out from having undergone surgery and chemotherapy and radiation therapy for her breast cancer. Kathy was 52 years old when she was diagnosed with cancer. Kathy has a condition called neurofibromatosis. She has thousands of tumors throughout her body, most of them benign. 2 years before the trip, one of the tumors in her left forearm became a malignant sarcoma. She had it removed. Within 9 months, it grew back. She had it removed again, had radiation therapy. Her left hand doesn't work quite right. We kind of had to use an ace bandage to connect her to her hiking pole. And in addition to her left arm not working right, she has very, very poor vision. Her balance is not good at all. She also is deathly afraid of heights. It's all the attributes you want in a mountain climbing partner. Kathy literally fell down more times than I can count climbing the mountain. But as you all know, it's not how many times you fall down. It's how many times you get back up.
Yeah.
And she got back up one more time than she fell down. This was Gail. Gail was the old man of this trip. He was like 65 years old. And I have to snicker because I'm now 67. Gail's an amazing senior. Gail and I did an Ironman triathlon together side by side. He was 70 years old when he crossed the finish line of an Ironman triathlon. Back then, he had just retired from John Deere. He had been diagnosed with prostate cancer a few years before. His cancer had come back and we had done radiation. And he came on this journey as he was beginning his life as a senior and looking for challenges and opportunities to pay it forward. This is Lynn. Lynn was diagnosed with breast cancer a year before this journey. Chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and surgery. Brandon was a young buck. He was diagnosed with a very aggressive adult leukemia and had several months of chemotherapy and a stem cell transplant at the Mayo Clinic. He was actually in the hospital for about 6 months. He was just 2 years out from that, still getting his strength back when he signed up to be part of this journey. Peggy Scott is a jackrabbit. I didn't find out that till we were on the trip together. She is a physical therapist at Unity Point and a breast cancer survivor. Trace is a police officer. Trace was about 30 years old when he was diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin's disease and had a whole bunch of chemotherapy and a little bit of radiation therapy and was cancer-free for a year. His cancer came back. He had a boatload of chemotherapy, stem cell transplant, and was cancer-free again for less than a year when it came back. More chemotherapy, more radiation, and he was less than a year out from his treatment when he decided to come on this trip. At the time that he came on this trip, he was not only a police officer, he was on the Des Moines SWAT team. I have to admit, I didn't know we had a SWAT team. And 3 days before we got on the airplane to fly to Kathmandu, he called me up and he said, "Hey Doc, I have spent a lot of time in your office. I'm going to show you my office. Show up tomorrow morning at the curb in front of your house, dressed all in black, and I'll pick you up at 2:30 a.m.
Whoa.
So I'm standing on the curb, 2:30 a.m., dressed all in black. He picks me up, dressed all in black. We go to the Des Moines SWAT team headquarters where there's 10 other guys dressed all in black. And we pile into this armored vehicle called a Bearcat. And at that point, I lived in Des Moines for 20 years, and we went into a part of Des Moines I'd never been in, this mission. And I can't really tell you what happened that night, but we were able to get everything done in time for us to make our plane 3 days later to fly to Kathmandu. Stacy thought she had early stage breast cancer, had a lumpectomy and radiation and some hormone therapy, and within 2 years her cancer had come back. She had bilateral mastectomies and a lot of chemotherapy and was just a year out from her cancer journey. Linda was the oldest woman on this particular trip. She was 56 years old, still the principal at Albia High School. Anybody know Linda? Anybody from Albia? Linda's since retired. She left her husband at home, brought her older son. He left his wife and kids at home. And she's a Hodgkin's disease survivor. And we actually did an all-school assembly for Albia High School from Everest Base Camp.
Wow.
So what do these individuals have in common? Number one, none of them are mountain climbers. Number two, none of them had ever had on their bucket list going to Mount Everest. They had in common their cancer diagnosis. They were on this trip not in spite of their cancer. They were on this trip because of their cancer. Specifically, they were on this journey because of the courage and confidence they had gained in their cancer journey that allowed them to intentionally put a mountain in their pathway. They did not know if they could climb this mountain, but they knew that together, trying to climb the mountain was going to be an incredibly transformative journey. So we worked out together 2 nights a week. We worked out at the Mercy Health and Fitness Center doing cardio and resistance training. We were leaving in April, so in March, every Saturday in March, we would go out and climb the mountains of central Iowa, getting used to the steep terrain and high altitude that we were going to face in the Himalayas. And then we took off and we flew from Des Moines to Chicago nonstop to Abu Dhabi, overnight in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, and then nonstop from Abu Dhabi to Kathmandu. And if you get a globe and you spin it, Iowa and Nepal are exactly on the opposite sides of the earth. So we spent a couple of days in Kathmandu. It's a 12-hour time change, getting used to the culture and exploring the heritage sites and the Buddhist temples and the Hindu temples and kind of just immersing ourselves in the sounds and smells of Kathmandu. And then we got on little-bitty airplanes and we flew up into the mountain. And the place we were flying to is a little village called Lukla, L-U-K-L-A. If you Google it, the first thing that comes up is world's most dangerous airport. So why is it the world's most dangerous airport? Well, the runway is very, very short. And it's built on like a 15-degree angle. And it's a short runway, but you know, I've been in the Navy. I know you can actually land a jet on a boat. Well, it's an aircraft carrier. If you've ever seen a jet land on an aircraft carrier, you know, it comes in and it drops a hook and it tries to catch a cable, and the cable pulls it just out. And then misses the cable. It just keeps going, and it takes off again, and it flies back around and comes around, and it does a do-over. Well, Lukla, the little bitty short runway, ends in a mountain. So if you don't stick the landings, there ain't no do-overs in Lukla. You don't stick the landing, you're stuck. And it's built on a cliff. So what you do, the little airplanes land, the doors open up, you throw your gear out, you jump out, The people that need to go back to Kathmandu, their area, they jump in. The airplane doesn't actually stop. It just then turns around and it flies off the cliff because the runway isn't long enough to get lift, but it's on a cliff, so we fly off the cliff on the way back home. So, world's most dangerous airport. We landed at the world's most dangerous airport on the exact day that this whole thing had been planned. Unbelievable. I have to admit, I wasn't prepared for the emotions that was going to overtake everyone as the airplanes took off, and there we were. And it was just us on our feet for the rest of the trip. No motorized vehicles. I had been at that very airport at the end of my excursion in 2000 when I had finished my trip. And I remember the sense of satisfaction that I felt as I had ended my solo mountain journey 20 years before. But on this day, it was a sense of anticipation and giving birth to dreams of 29 people as we began the journey. So I knew it was going to be difficult. In fact, that's part of the reason we were there. I knew it was going to be physically challenging. I knew it was going to be emotionally challenging. I knew that people were going to be homesick and they were going to be scared. And I knew that one of the things that would help would be to have a rhythm that would get us through the day, every day, a rhythm. So the rhythm we created was early in the morning. We'd be awakened by the Sherpas with either a knock on the lodge door, or if we were in a tent that night, a rustle of the tent, and they would serve us a cup of hot tea first thing in the morning with a greeting of namaste, a greeting that acknowledges the divine within each of us. And then we would assemble for breakfast, and one of the cancer survivors would give a blessing before breaking bread, thanking everyone that had grown the food, that had transported the food up the mountain, that had prepared the food for us, and praying that we would have the strength to get through the day and the wisdom to learn what the mountain was going to teach us. And then we would go outside and we would I took along our yoga instructor from the Mercy Health and Fitness Center, and we did a bit of yoga every morning, kind of got the muscles and joints loosened up. And then I would share with the group a reflection before starting the trip, sort of setting our intention for the day. And I want to share with you today the reflection that I shared with the group the very first day we set out on the trail for the 10-day trip up to the mountain. And this comes from a book I'd recommend to everyone. It's by John O'Donohue. It's called To Bless the Space Between Us. John O'Donohue is an Irishman, lived his entire life in Ireland. He was a Catholic priest, left the priesthood for the love of a woman, continued to write about beauty and spirituality and nature. And this book is filled with blessings for every possible occasion. And the blessing I'm going to share with you today is the blessing I shared with the group the very first day, and appropriately it's called For a New Beginning. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time it's watched your desire, feeling the emptiness grow inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety, the great promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, and wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm. for your soul senses the world that awaits you. So come with us as we climb to Everest Base Camp on the Khumbu Trail. So the Khumbu Trail is the path that goes along the Dukosi River up through the villages up to Everest. So it starts off, it's about 12 feet wide, it's easy going, I mean it's steep, but it's easy terrain, and the higher you go, the smaller the villages, and the fewer the villages, then the narrower the path, and the steeper the terrain, and the higher the altitude, and the less oxygen, and the colder, step by step. But the beauty that you see as you journey as a group, and the splendor around every corner, the magnificence that God has created, the absolute glory and companionship and splendor, along with some headaches and diarrhea and bliss and blisters. And we've only been traveling for about a day now. So how do you get a group of it? Oh, and challenges. We have some challenges. If your balance isn't very good and you have a fear of height, the good news is you only have 4 of these bridges to go over on the way up and 4 more on the way back down. So how do you get a group of individuals that are not mountain climbers, not athletes, to climb? There's a secret. The secret is hugs. Hugs is the secret to getting people up the mountains. Now granted, occasionally you kind of suck it up and a kick in the butt. But mostly it's hugs, liberally sprinkled with antibiotics and high altitude medicine, but mostly it's hugs that get you up. One day you may be strong and you're giving your helping hand to one of your climbing partners, and on the next day you're in need of the helping hand as we go together as a group with our simple existence of putting one foot in front of another. How do you climb a mountain? One step at a time. All you have to do is be prepared to commit to climb one more step. 1,000,000 more times, but one more step, and you can make it to the top. And as you travel, especially in the lower part, while we're still villages, there's the opportunity to see that you're not in Iowa anymore, and people do things differently up in the Khumbu than they do elsewhere. And if you're at least bit introspective, you start thinking about, is the way we do everything necessarily the best, and the beauty of being out in nature. And I would say that you even have the opportunity to perhaps even see the face of God in dimensions that are different than you might have imagined. This is Kathy. So remember Kathy, she has neurofibromatosis, her vision is poor, her balance is horrible, she has poor coordination, her left hand doesn't work, and she's definitely afraid of heights. Every step along the way was a challenge for Kathy. Whether it was crossing the bridges, whether it was crossing the streams, whether it was just hiking along the trail. I love this photograph. The photograph on your left is Kathy in front, and behind her is Teresa. Remember Teresa? She's had both her breasts removed, her colon removed, has an artificial hip replacement. Early on, Teresa realized there was only one person on the whole trip that was slower than she was, and that was Kathy. And she also realized that she got tremendous joy out of helping Kathy on her journey up the mountain. I could show you 1,000 versions of that photograph of Teresa helping Kathy under the watchful gaze of the Sherpa. So I've used the word Sherpa many times. Most of you probably know what it means. It means at least 3 different things. So this is Lynn, and this is the only female Sherpa on our team, Anglok Pa. So Sherpa means 3 things at least. Number 1, it's the name of the tribe of individuals who live high up in the mountains between Nepal and Tibet. And second, since we think everybody has to have a first name and a last name, most of them now use Sherpa as their last name. first name is often and traditionally the day of the week they were born. And third, Sherpa has come to mean what they do, to guide someone, to be a Sherpa, to lead and guide someone. Ang Lak Pa was with us because her husband was the head Sherpa. And most of the Sherpas spoke English quite well. Ang Lak Pa knew about 2 words. Okay, okay. And maybe that's only one. But her smile says it all. And she just had this sense of compassion and joy. So about 3 days before we got to the highest point, Lynn got altitude sickness and she wasn't responding to medication. The best, surefire, guaranteed way of treating altitude sickness, go down the mountain. So we sent her down the mountain with Ang Lak Pa. Ang Lak Pa took her into her own village, into her own home, and nursed her back to health. The last day of hiking, we're at the highest point. So we're, the trail now has gone from 12 feet to about 1 foot. It is steep, it is cold, it's starting to snow. Everybody's got a sore throat, thick boogers, dirty underwear, blisters, and in the distance is Everest Base Camp, and we're just one more step. And then we arrive at Everest Base Camp, and I swear to God this happened, almost as if on cue, almost as if a movie script. Kathy fell flat on her face. It was only like the 800th time she had fallen, and like she had done every time before, she jumped up in her pink fleece and her pink hat, and Charlie and the mountain climbers come out of their tent. They had not met the group of cancer survivors. Charlie was long gone when we started our journey. I think he thought I was just going to go find a bunch of mountain climbing guys that had skin cancer and say we were mountain climbers. And so they came out and they saw our motley crew. Everyone was in tears. We got to spend the night on the glacier in pup tents at Everest Base Camp. Got down to 20 below, freezing cold. All the water froze because the sky had cleared. Stars you could see forever. And we woke up the next morning and the sun was just bouncing off the glaciers. We had taken with us prayer flags. So you see prayer flags commonly in Nepal. They are very traditional. The traditional Tibetan prayer flags, there are 5 different colors made of square cloth. Each color stands for a different element in the Tibetan universe: sky, water, air, wind, and fire. And the traditional ones are inscribed with the Tibetan prayer, Om Mani Padme Om. And the idea is that they fly up in the sky in beautiful, auspicious places, and when the wind catches the flag, it carries the prayer around the world. Well, our prayer flags that we took with us were the same color and the same shape as the Tibetan prayer flags, but instead of being inscribed with a Tibetan prayer, each one was handmade in Iowa in memory of someone who had died of cancer, or in honor of someone who was still on their cancer journey but couldn't be with us on the trip. And this is Chris. This was the very first prayer flag made for part of the Prayer Flag Project. Chris had died about a year before we left on our journey. And when it was in the newspaper, the Dr. Deming was getting grouped to Everest Base, I was driving to work that morning. I didn't know it was in the paper. Chris's dad called me. He said, "Oh my God, Chris would have been all over this." Chris went to Indiana High School, was a junior at Grinnell College. He had a 3-year journey with an unusual type of cancer. It started in his tailbone, and ultimately, before he died, he had lost use of his legs and was beginning to lose use of his arms, but he was still totally engaged in life. And I said, absolutely, Chris is going with us. And out of that conversation came the Prayer Flag Project. And this was the very first prayer flag. And as I said, we all then took prayer flags with us. My mom had been diagnosed with incurable lung cancer when I was in high school. Mom was up there in the Himalayas Land Sky, as were many patients of mine and family members. And we did at Everest Base Camp, American Cancer Society Relay for Life. So the first lap, we created a track around the pole with all the flags, is about celebrate. As we celebrated those cancer survivors and everyone that had made it up to Everest Base Camp. The second is about remembering those that aren't with us. And not just remembering, but vowing that their life will not have been in vain, and that we will require and demand of ourselves that we do something to make a difference. And the last lap is about fighting back, about really dedicating ourselves, not just to doing this trip and having a photo album, but to committing to helping others when we came back. So we ended up, after the Relay for Life, with hugs and another photograph, and would have taken us 10 days to get up the mountain, took us 4 days to get back down. And the next thing you know, we're standing at the top of the escalator waiting to descend into the Des Moines Airport. And I remember clearly we hung together, we let everybody else go first because we knew there was going to be family and friends waiting for us. And I remember saying, I don't know what this trip is going to do. It's going to change our lives, and we're going to have to figure it out. But may I suggest, before we descend this escalator, begin our lives again, can we find the Sherpa within each of us to use this experience not just to illuminate our own path, but to help illuminate the path of others. And out of that has come Above and Beyond Cancer. The epilogue is really unending. So 2 months after we're back, Kathy calls me up and says, hey Doc, I got this bump behind my leg. And I thought, oh, probably an inflamed Baker's cyst. You did a lot of miles. Come on in. We did a scan. She had a new cancer of her leg. It was resected. Kathy went on to have 5 more tumors. Kathy died a year ago at Easter. Her final tumor was in her cervical spinal cord, leaving her quadriplegic. She could move one arm a little bit. She would come every single week to the spin class that I teach out of the Mercy Health and Fitness Center. And when she could no longer move her legs, we got a hand crank. And even 2 weeks before she died, only able to move one arm, she participated in spin class. She lived life to the fullest, and she continues to inspire people who didn't have the opportunity to know her in her lifetime. Second part of the epilogue was a month after that. I'm out at Easter Lake getting ready to start a triathlon, and my phone goes off, and it's a lot of phone numbers. And I go, this must be an international call. I take the phone call, and it's from Lakpa, our head Sherpa. And he says, Dr. Dick, Ang Lakpa has leukemia. And I just say, oh, Lakpa, we can help. And what I'm thinking is, what? I mean, I bet 90% of people in the mountains of Nepal who get leukemia just die and never know they have leukemia. Over the course of a week, we found out that Ang Lakpa truly did have leukemia, an incurable leukemia, but one for which there is an oral medicine that can control the disease. The oral medicine costs $80,000 a year. Their earnings are about $2,000 a year. So the first thing we did as Above and Beyond Cancer was to talk to the drug manufacturer who agreed to provide free of charge the oral medicine, but she had to get to Kathmandu once a month to get a month's supply of medicine. It's a 2-week walk for her to get from her village to Kathmandu. So we send over a plane ticket once a month so she can fly from the world's most dangerous airport to Kathmandu, get her blood test, get a month of medicine, and fly back home. So I thought that trip where it's taking people to Everest Base Camp was just like a one and done. And before you know it, it's like, well, where are you going to go next? Well, so if you think that the 29 people that went to Everest Base Camp or something, take a look at the 40 people that went to the summit of Kilimanjaro the next January. Included in this group was a 72-year-old Catholic priest with incurable cancer, a 70-year-old guy with incurable prostate cancer, a 40-year-old woman with incurable leukemia on chemotherapy, all making it to the summit of Kilimanjaro. Wow. You have no idea what you can do. The next year we decided to do a little bike ride. No, not a bike ride, a bicycle race. We enter a bicycle race, the first bicycle race any of us had ever entered. There were 8 of us, 7 cancer survivors and myself. Oldest person age 67, youngest person age 28, on a bicycle race from the Oceanside, California to Annapolis, Maryland, 3,000 miles. Our group of 8 bicyclists did the trip in 6 days, 21 hours, and 17 minutes. You have no idea what you can do. The next summer, instead of riding our bicycle, we did a run. And we ran, this was our spiritual journey to back to the Himalayas. And this was a trip with 36 individuals of mixed religions. We had Catholics, Protestants, Mormons, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, agnostics, and one self-declared atheist on this journey, and we stopped at every shrine, temple, monastery, and convent along the way, and we summited 3 mountains, including a 20,000-foot snow-covered peak. Included in that trip was a 65-year-old woman from Minneapolis who had her arm amputated for a sarcoma, and I remember going up the last bit, she said, "Doc, there's 2 good things about being handicapped. Back in Minneapolis, I get really good parking spots, and here in the Himalayas, I get 2 Sherpas to myself." The next year, we ran across America. We started off at the Pacific Ocean in Washington State, and we ran 4,000 over the Andes Mountains and ended up down in the sacred city of Machu Picchu. And the next year, we were going to go to Tibet, but the earthquake happened, and so instead we did a medical mission trip, and we went to 2 cancer hospitals in Kathmandu. And this is Kelly, a sarcoma survivor with Depeche, who had just had his leg amputated for a sarcoma. And the next year we went back to Africa, and we did medical mission work in Nairobi, Kenya, and then summited Mount Kilimanjaro. And the next year we finally made it to Tibet, crossing over. We did a 110-mile journey that ended in the circumambulation of the most sacred mountain in the world, Mount Kailash, 23,000 feet high, on a journey that included cancer survivors age 76 to 24 years young. And then last year, this was us in Colorado, where individuals, including a gentleman 81 years old with incurable cancer, came with us on a journey that included hikes up to the Continental Divide. So, I have to finish here pretty soon. This might be a good opportunity to finish, but first of all, just quickly, the lessons. None of us is as good as all of us. There's not a single thing that any one of you have ever done all by yourself that's worth a hill of beans. It takes a team to do anything that's important, whether it's climbing a mountain or riding your bike or running across the country. Adversity leads to personal growth. When things are going hunky-dory, you don't learn much about yourself. It's when things are challenging and difficult, you learn what you're capable of. Cancer doesn't give you strength. It allows you to find the strength that's already inherently there. And finding and recognizing your strength is what resiliency is. Courage is grace under pressure. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's using fear to wake you up to pay attention to the dangers around you and then still taking the next step. How do you climb a mountain? One step at a time. Not every step is equal, though. One should experience fear before making this step. And that fear should wake you up to be careful and cautious. You don't want to stub your toe on that step. Suffering leads to compassion. As my friend and patient Monsignor Bagnano taught me, if we all spoke Latin, we wouldn't be amazed by the relationship. The word for suffering is passion, as in the passion of Christ. And in Latin, the word compassion literally means with one's suffering. So it's our own suffering that allows us to recognize suffering within ourselves and within others. And not just to recognize it, but to reach out compassionately to relieve suffering. Having a higher purpose, secret weapon to success. We've done lots of adventure travel, but there's nothing like coming together with a higher purpose in mind. Take time for reflection every day, whether it's prayer or meditation or setting an intention. Every day, take time for reflection. And live today with passion. If diamonds were as plentiful as grains of sand, they'd be worthless. If all of us lived forever, wasting a day of our life would be trivial. It's because we don't live forever that today is so valuable. Don't let a minute of your life go unlived. And finally, what goes around comes around. I told you the story of Anglock Pa and how she helped us on the way, and then how she was diagnosed with cancer, and we were able to help her. Well, the next time we went to Nepal, waiting for us at the airport were Lakpa and Anglock Pa. Now, with incurable leukemia, on medication we were helping to provide, she became our Sherpa again and took us to the top of the mountain.
Wow.
Above and beyond.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you so much. That was very inspiring. Dr. Deming has a book that is for sale over here. I believe it's hard copy
Yeah,
or
hard copy
soft
or paperback. It's a book just got published that includes many photographs from the journey, but it's
Great.
really about the philosophical journey through cancer. And over there is the table, and you're welcome to.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And I do want to remind you that 10% of all the